Welcome back to Yehoshua's Daf Yomi Shiur, where the Daf continues daily until the complete revelation of Mashiach ben David, Messiah, son of David. Today we will be studying Tractate Chullin, page 119, starting with 119a, Kuf Yud Tes Amud Aleph, top of the page, with the words Rav Hai, B'mai Mokim La. V'Rav Hai B'mai Mokim La, I Biyad Kasher Eisho. The Gemara explains the objection, and according to Rav, who holds that a handle that is attached to less than an olive bulk of food, less than a kazayas of food, or protection, or that is attached to less than a bean bulk of food, is not considered a handle or protection with regard to imparting impurity. In what manner does he interpret this Braita? If the Braita is discussing the case of a bone without marrow, and therefore the bone constitutes merely a handle for the flesh, which measures less than an olive bulk, then the first clause of the Braita is difficult because it indicates that a handle that is attached to less than an olive bulk of food is considered a handle with regard to imparting impurity. If the Braisa is discussing the case of a bone containing marrow, and therefore the bone constitutes protection for food measuring less than an olive bulk, less than kazais, then the last clause of the Braisa is difficult because Yehuda ben Nekosa apparently holds that protection that is attached to less than a kazayas of food, it means an olive amount of food, is not considered protection with regard to imparting impurity, contrary to the opinion of Rav, who holds that it is protection unless it is attached to less than a bean bulk of food. The Gemara answers, if you wish, say that Rav interprets the Braita as discussing the case of a bone that constitutes protection. If you wish, say instead that Rav interprets the Braita as discussing the case of a bone that constitutes a handle. The Gemara explains it. The Gemara explains its answer. If you wish, explains its answers. If you wish, say that the Braita is discussing the case of a bone which constitutes a handle, and Rav stated his opinion in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda ben Nekosa, who maintains that the house does not become impure because he holds that a handle is attached to less than an olive bulk of flesh, does not impart impurity. And if you wish, say that the Braita is discussing the case of a bone that constitutes protection, and Rav stated his opinion in accordance with the opinion of the first Tana, who maintains that the house is impure because he holds that protection attached to less than an olive bulk of flesh imparts impurity if the flesh measures at least a bean bulk. Rabbi Yochanan could have said that the entire Braita is discussing the case of a bone that constitutes a handle. And Rabbi Yochanan stated his opinion in accordance with the opinion of the first Tana, who maintains that the house becomes impure because he holds that a handle is attached to less than an olive bulk of food imparts impurity, but he did not state his opinion in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda ben Nekosa, who maintains that the house does not become impure. Toshima, come in here and from the Braisa. The Braisa or Mishnah? Anyways, Toshima, come in here. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Kulis, Shiye Sholek Zayis, Boso, Goreres Kuletuma. Acher Moimrim, Afilu Ein Oleho, Elekifol Goreres Kuletuma. Come in here, another objection to the opinion of Rav and Rabbi Yochanan from the Tosefta, Oktzin 2.5. Rabbi Yehuda says, with regard to a femur that has an olive bulk of flesh upon it, the flesh draws the entire femur into ritual impurity if any part of the femur comes into contact with a dead, creeping animal. The sage referred to as Acherim says, even if there is only a bean bulk of flesh upon the femur, it draws the entire femur into impurity. Derav, hai b'may mokim lo, ibiyad kasher seva, ibishoymer kasher resho. The Gemara asks, in what manner does Rav interpret this Braita? If the Braita is discussing the case of a femur that constitutes merely a handle for the flesh, then the latter clause of the Braita is difficult because Acherim apparently maintains that a handle that is attached to less than an olive bulk of flesh imparts impurity, contrary to the opinion of Rav. If the Braita is discussing the case of a femur that constitutes protection, then the first clause of the Braita is difficult because Rabbi Yehuda apparently holds that protection that is attached to less than an olive bulk of flesh does not impart impurity, contrary to the opinion of Rav. Ibait ema biyad the Gemara answers, if you wish, say that the Braita is discussing the case of a femur that constitutes a handle, and Rav stated his opinion in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who maintains that a handle attached to less than an olive bulk of flesh does not impart impurity. And if you wish, say instead that the Braita is discussing the case of a femur that constitutes protection, and Rav stated his opinion in accordance with the opinion introduced with the words Acherim says, according to which even protection attached to less than an olive bulk of flesh imparts impurity. And Rabbi Yochanan could have said that the entire Braita is referring to a case of a femur that constitutes protection, and Rabbi Yochanan stated his opinion in accordance with the opinion referred to as Acherim says, according to which even protection that is attached to a bean bulk of flesh imparts impurity. Acherim. The Gemara asks, how is Rabbi Yochanan's opinion consistent with the opinion referred to as Acherim says? Don't they say that protection that is attached to a bean bulk of flesh imparts impurity? And Rabbi Yochanan holds that even protection that is attached to less than a bean bulk of food imparts impurity? The Gemara answers, Acherim agrees that even protection that is attached to less than a bean bulk imparts impurity. Nevertheless, since the first Tana states that the specific measure of an olive bulk, Acherim also states the specific measure of a bean bulk, even though he maintains his opinion with regard to a measure of less than a bean bulk as well. Amarava, Daikanami, the Bishoy Meraskinon, the Gatani Kulis, Shmaminon. Rava said the language of the Braita is also precise, indicating that we are dealing with protection and not a handle, as it teaches the case of a femur which contains marrow, and therefore the bone provides protection for the food inside. If the Braita were discussing a handle, it would have taught this halacha with regard to any other bone that is attached to flesh and not specifically a femur. Conclude from it that the Braita is discussing the halacha of protection. The Braita cited above. The Braita cited above. Where are you? Right. Teaches that Acherim says even if there is only a bean bulk of flesh attached to the femur, it causes the entire femur to become impure. A dispute was stated with regard to this opinion. Rabbi Hanina says when Acherim stated the measure of a bean bulk, this is a specific measure, and Acherim holds that the halacha of protection applies to an appendage only if a bean bulk of food is attached to it. And Rabbi Yochanan says this is not a specific measure. Acherim holds that the halacha of protection applies even if it is attached to less than a bean bulk of food. Ein ze shiur. Yokitol nikfol. I to come out Tanakama shiura. Ka'amri inu nami shiura. The Gemara asks, how is it possible for Rabbi Yochanan to hold that this is not a specific measure? But doesn't the Braita explicitly teach the measure of a bean bulk? The Gemara answers, indeed, Acherim holds that protection that is attached to even less than a bean bulk of food imparts impurity. But since the first Tana states the specific measure of an olive bulk, Acherim also states the specific measure of a bean bulk, even though he maintains his opinion with regard to a measure of less than a bean bulk as well. Tashima, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah metal b'shel pol metal b'shel kitnis mipnei sheroitza b'mish mushan. The Gemara suggests come in here proof against the opinion of Rav. From that we just saw it in the Mishnah, because in 1.5 Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah deems a pod containing beans that come in contact with a dead creeping animal ritually pure. Since beans are large and do not require the protection of the pod is not considered protection for the beans and therefore does not impart impurity. But he deems a pod containing smaller legumes that came in contact with a dead creeping animal ritually impure, if even only one grain is attached to the pod, because one desires the use of the pod when handling the legumes so that he will not damage them, and it is therefore considered protection which imparts impurity. Apparently, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah holds that even protection that is attached to less than a bean bulk of food imparts impurity, contrary to the opinion of Rabbi Hanina and Rav. The Gemara rejects this proof. The explanation of that Mishnah is in accordance with that which Rav Acha, the son of Rav, said in the context of a different discussion. That Mishnah is discussing a case where a dead creeping animal came into contact with the stalk to which the pod is attached, but not with the pod itself. And therefore the halacha in the Mishnah is not with regard to the matter of protection, rather it is with regard to the matter of a handle, as the stalk serves as a handle for the pod and its attached grain. Here too, with regard to this proof, one can respond that the Mishnah discussing a case where a dead creeping animal came in contact with the stalk, and therefore the halacha in the Mishnah is with regard to the matter of a handle, since the Mishnah is referring to a stalk, and the stalk has many pods on it, it serves as a handle to more than an olive of food, and is consistent with the opinions of Rabbi Hanina and Rav. And what does Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah mean when he says that, in the case of legumes, the stalk is impure because one desires the use of the stalk when handling the legumes? He is referring to using, meaning carrying the legumes with the stalk. Toshima, Tona de Rabbi Shmuel, al kol zera zorah sheli zorah. Kederach sheben Adam ritzin, chita b'klip also, v'sroyah b'klip also, v'dosh b'klip also. Come in here a proof from that which the school of Rabbi Ishmael taught. With regard to the impurity of food, the verse states, on any sowing seed that is sown, Leviticus 11:37, indicating that the entire seed is susceptible to impurity when it is in a state where it is typical for people to take it out to the field for sowing. This applies to wheat in its shell, and barley in its shell, and lentils in their shells. It is derived from here that shells and other appendages that protect the food are considered part of the food. Since wheat, barley, and lentil grains are smaller than a bean bulk, this statement indicates that even protection that is attached to less than a bean bulk of food imparts impurity, contrary to the opinion of Rabbi Hanina and Rav. Berio Shani. The Gemara rejects this proof. A grain is a distinct entity, and therefore its status is different. The halacha of protection is applicable to a distinct entity, even if it measures less than a bean bulk. Boy Yehoshua, Yehoshua is a dilemma. Okay, we'll stop here because it's the end of 119a and continue with 119b.